Hello programmers! Today we're going to talk about user defaults, or keeping track of data that the user has selected and being able to use that later in the app when somebody launches it. So for example, I'm going to show you how to make this little example where you can select a character and become one of these cute little animals, and not only does it remember what animal you selected while you're running the app, but if you get a phone call, swipe the app off the screen and have to restart, it's still going to remember what animal you selected last. So we're going to show how to do that in Swift using user defaults. We're going to start by creating a brand new Xcode project, and I'm going to leave game selected and hit next. And you can give it whatever name you want. I'm going to call this game animals, and we could develop this more. Leave Swift and Sprite Kit selected and decide where you want to save this. And we start with the basic Hello World scene, which has Hello World. I do not need that for this game, so I can select the Hello label and hit delete on the keyboard. And instead, I'm going to adjust the scene to what I need. All right, so what do I need? Well, I want a place to show the animals. I'm going to choose Color Sprite, and once I have one of those, I can copy and paste. Copy and paste, and I could do as many animals as I want. Maybe for now I'll just do 3 and we can add more later. We also want a label that says select your character. So instead of saying just the word label, I'm going to say select your character. And I don't know why it always defaults to that ultra light, which is hard to read when you've got old eyes like I do. But let's change this to a bold and maybe a larger font size. So select your character. We could center this. And then I want one more of these red squares. So either I can copy and paste or I can drag in another color sprite. So I want whatever they selected to be down at the bottom. So we'll have another label that says your character, and then we'll show them the character that they selected. Again, I'm going to make the font a little bit bigger and make it bold. Okay, so now it's time for some graphics. So I went to this website, OpenGameArt.org, and there's a lot of free graphics that you can use if you're just getting started with game development, and free sound files too. I just searched for animals, and I thought I wanted more than one animal that I could use in my game. So I found this animal pack, and it's got a bunch of animals, 30 animals, and it's in a zip file. So shout out to Kenny.nl. Thank you so much for putting your graphics on this OpenGameArt website. So I'm going to download these, and it has 30 animals, and you can select between whether you want them to be circles or squares, and there's some other options. I'm going to just pick my favorite animals out of here and drag them into the assets section of my game. So pig is my favorite animal, so I'm going to put that in there. The zebra is pretty cute. They're all pretty cute, but I'm going to pick some that are like just distinctly different colors. And now in my scene, I can choose the texture is going to be one of those animals. So the giraffe and the pig. And I'm going to have to add some more squares if I want more selections, but we'll start out with just 3 selections. All right, cool. So now I want this to become whatever they clicked on. Before I do that, I'm going to select the different animals and type in a name for those. This one was a giraffe, and the next one was a pig, and finally we've got a snake. And I'm intentionally making sure that my names are lowercase and they exactly match the names of the graphics when we drag them in, because in my code I'm going to use this name to figure out what graphic we need to pull up. So the code, we can go over to game scene, and it has a lot of starter code for doing things that the Hello World example has. I don't need a lot of that, so I'm gonna pretty much gut it and delete everything inside the function did move, but I'll leave that function around. I'm going to get rid of a bunch of functions, but keep touches begin, and we'll end up putting some new code in there. And so this is what it will look like after I delete everything I'm not using. All right, let's add some code. So when somebody touches on one of those animals, we want something to happen. So I'm going to add some code to the touches began. And I'm going to say I want to create a touch variable to keep track of the first touch. You may be using more than one finger or more than one hand. And so that's why we've got a set of touches here. And then I want to look at the location where you made that touch inside of the scene that we have here. So the location, and then I want to look at what nodes, like what animals you had been touching. So there could be in your scene, my scene doesn't have a lot of overlap in it, but you could have different SK sprite nodes on top of other SK sprite nodes. So that's why we've got an array here. So we want to look at the array of different items at that location where we touched. In my scene, there's only going to be one item at a time that you're tapping on because there's no overlap. So we can get from that array, what is the first thing? And what's the name of the first thing that you tapped on? And for debugging, to see if it's working, I'm going to go ahead and print you tapped, and then that. All right, so let's run that again. All right, so if I tap on the giraffe, the debugging statement says giraffe, pig, snake. What if you tap in the background and there's nothing? You'll get a nil. You tap on the label, you'll get a nil. So we need to account for that they may tap somewhere other than one of the three cute animals. The first thing I want to change in the code is what happens if what they tapped was not an animal. So if it was a nil, I want to be able to handle that somehow. And I'm going to say if they tapped and it was just in the background or something, I'm going to say, you know, the default is you're going to get a pig if you tap somewhere weird. And I also, now that we're changing that tapped, we can't make it a constant or a let, so we're going to need to make that a var, a variable. And we also need to, now that we're sure tap doesn't have a nil in it, we can actually use that for the next thing, which is changing the background. I am going to, first I'll need to double check the name. This red square, the one that I want to change to be whatever animal they're selecting, I'm going to give that the name you. You could call it like you're a character or something, but I thought you would be nice and short. So I'm going to look for that name. So I'm going to say in self, I'm going to look for a child node with the name you. And it should be there because we just double checked. But if it wasn't there, you know, we'd get an error on this line. So I'm going to look for that and assume I found it, and I'm going to change the texture to whatever image has the same name as what they tapped on. So let's give that a try. Oh, let's see, one more thing. Let's see, optional string must be unwrapped. I know that it's not nil because I checked earlier, so I'm going to try putting an exclamation point there and see if that gets rid of that warning there. And if we try it, and now we click on the giraffe, woohoo, our character's a giraffe, pig, snake, cool. So the second part of what I promised with this video is that when you stop the app and restart it, we want you to be able to remember what the user selected. And right now it doesn't do that, but it's only going to be a few lines that we need to add to actually get that functionality in here. So I'm going to use something called UserDefaults. And it's good if you have just a little bit of data that you need to save on the device, on the phone or the iPad. and be able to use it in between different runs of the program, in between phone calls or swiping the app off the screen or whatever. So I'm going to set a little piece of data that's going to be stored on the phone, and I'm going to associate a key with that so I can look up the key later. So I'm going to say set tapped to tapped is like the name of the animal they clicked on. I'm going to say that is going to be associated with the key character. And now when we start the app, so when we move to this scene or this view, we can check for that. We can say, I want to look to see if a character has already been selected. So I'm going to look in the user defaults, and I want to get an object for the key character. And there's two things that could happen. One, if it's the first time they've ever run the app, then they're going to get a nil. That's not going to be set yet. But if the character data that you got back is not equal to nil, they've already selected a character, and we want to start out the scene with that character they selected last time. So I'm going to do something similar to copy this. Oops, I lost the L. Copy the lines here because we're going to do something similar. Look for that child node with the name U, only this time we are going to use the user default data that we just got to figure out what texture we should put there. All right, so the first time you launch the app, it doesn't know the user default yet for the character, but if we pick like the giraffe and then we exit out, I could use this button at the bottom of the simulator, exit out of the app. If you're putting it on your own device, you can even swipe the app off the screen and open a different app and come back to it later. It's going to remember where you left off. Same thing with the pig. If I leave that game, I could do something else on the phone, come back, it's going to remember where I left off, leave and come back. So user defaults is good if you want the user to be able to make a selection, and the next time you open the app, it's going to work. When you're saving the user data, you can just say, I want to set this key to either an int, a float, or a string. And you can also save arrays and dictionaries, so it's not just ints, floats, and strings. All right, good luck. Happy programming.